Welcome to the official episode here on Hardcore Sports Network of the Longball podcast. We have some glitchy green screens going on today. It's the first episode. It's going to be a little rickety, but we're glad to bring it to you guys. That's not a bad idea. But my co-host, Hayden, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. I'm pretty excited for this. It's going to be a great little series we got going on, and let's get it.
And of course, again, welcome to the inaugural episode of the Longball podcast. This is going to be the baseball podcast here on Hardcore Sports Network. The cool thing is we're taking over an off season where there's no lockout. So Hayden and I will have you guys covered with all the news from here on out throughout the World Series and, of course, what's going on in the off season. And, of course, today is August 6th, 2022. What just happened? Let's let our viewers know what just passed on August 2nd, if you may, Hayden.
Yeah, well, we had the MLB Trade Deadline. So, obviously, definitely a little bit more of an intense trade deadline than I guess we were, accustomed to the last couple of years. I mean, we've seen it, in past years where some teams make some shocking moves and some teams make really questionable moves, or some teams just make the best move. It's a cherry on a cake. And this year we definitely saw some interesting moves. I mean, obviously Juan Soto, I think, is definitely probably the number one guy of importance for this trade deadline, to say for the least.
Do you want to recap what the Mets and I'll say what the Braves have done so we can get that out of the way? Because for those viewers wondering, Hayden's a big Mets fan. I'm a big Braves fan. So.
Yes, don't be fooled with the Rays hat. But, yeah, I mean, the Mets trade deadline was a little bit of a disappointment. I mean, I think it was 50-50. Billy Epler coming in. Obviously, this was his first full season going into the New York Mets as their general manager. And I'll say this, Billy Epler had a better offseason than trade deadline. Right now, the Mets are playing good baseball. So, I mean, is it as vital? But still, even the best teams in baseball, the Dodgers, the Yankees, whoever, there's always room to improve. For example, I think those two things were bullpen and a hard-hitting power DH. And the Mets addressed the offense, but I want to talk more in the pitching because that's where it was really lacked. A lefty. Bringing in a lefty was the biggest thing for this New York Mets bullpen, and they just didn't do that. Instead, they brought in the right-hander from Chicago, from the Cubs, and Michael Givens. And, okay, it's a fair guy. He's, like I said, been 50 for 50 in his outings. His first appearance against the Nationals, he got slammed. But the other day against the Braves, he pitched well. So hopefully he can, give the Mets to what he did in Chicago with the Cubs. But having a pretty good season, like I said, sub-2 ERA. No major complaints with Givens. Ground ball pitchers, that's always effective. But you didn't go after a lefty. And, I mean, there were so many guys that were named. But I think that was the most disappointing part, considering right now that, we saw in today's game, you had Juan Lopez go out there and just completely screw up today. So with little stuff like that, where the Mets are going to have to figure out how to manage with this, they're going to have to get some type of remedy from the left-handed side, from the bullpen, and simply enough depth. Because I wonder with this Mets bullpen, is Seth Lugo going to give you his 2019 appearance? I mean, besides Edwin Diaz, there's really no one in this bullpen I trust. I don't trust Oli Rodriguez as my sole lefty in the bullpen. So the bullpen, that's really where I was, really infuriated. The bats, Billy Epler did a little bit of a sneaky stuff. Obviously, they brought in Daniel Vogelbach a couple of weeks before the deadline, and he's been nothing but phenomenal since. I'm sure Blake can agree. He's been phenomenal, providing power, walking. He's getting on base. And that's something that the Mets DH in J.D. Davis and Dom Smith haven't been doing. They brought in Darren Ruff, a guy to hit lefties. We know that the Mets do have their fair share of complexities when it comes to facing left-handed pitching. So Darren Ruff, a guy with a 900 OPS plus 900 OPS, against left-handed pitching, that's going to be the big job there. So I really, really liked to see that. Obviously, who else did they acquire? So, I mean, like I said, the DH role was kind of the biggest thing to be talked about. Obviously, what you gave up for Darren Ruff, you got rid of J.D. Davis. Listen, I think it's more of a close relationship, you like J.D. I mean, what he's done, but sadly, the last 2 years, he just hasn't been able to perform, and the Mets are showing if you're not going to perform, goodbye. And, with J.D., I wish him the best of luck in San Francisco. Was he a big importance to this team? Nah, he wasn't an everyday player, but he had some nice moments with this team, some great memories. So overall, when it comes to JD Davis, I wish him the best of luck in San Francisco. Traded away Thomas Pucky. I can care less about that. And 2 prospects, a little bit of give up a little bit too much for Darren Ruff. But, like I said, if he can come in and bring what a 2015 Cespedes did, then I'm fine. So overall, Mets deadline, the bats are looking good, but the pitching isn't. So I'd give it a solid C.
See, that's kind of where I had I gave the Mets deadline a solid 7 of 10, and I gave the Braves an 8 of 10, and here's why. Well, first of all, an update on JD Davis. I believe he already has 2 hits, both 2 or 3 hits and 2 homers out in the Bay so far. So maybe the change of scenery will do well for him as the Giants here. For some reason, deciding to stay in the wild card race here in the month of August. So I'll deep dive on my side of things for the Atlanta Braves before we jump ahead and let everybody know some of the big standings. First of all, shout out AK Eagles for joining, one of the fathers of this network. I appreciate the support. How you doing tonight, Miles? Good to hear from everybody here in the chat. All right, so the Braves, of course, at the deadline made a couple acquisitions of their own, as many contending teams did. The first one was a couple of days before the deadline. The Braves grabbed back the utility man from the Washington Nationals, who was on the Braves World Series team last year, Ray Adrianza. Is this move something that moves the paper? Not really, but it's somebody who has familiarity with the clubhouse, with Ozzie Albies being hurt and the DH now being such a thing in the National League where you don't need a lot of utility guys. It just kind of made sense to fit the mold, but I don't think he's here for the long term whatsoever. But I do like the pickup knowing that Ozzie Albies won't be back till early September. And I believe Adrianza is going to give you more than what Cano has for all 3 of his teams this year. Of course, moving on, the Braves also picked up Robbie Grossman, the corner outfielder from the Detroit Tigers, came over slashing not a very good line against the right-handed side of the plate. Here's the thing, though. He played in Comerica Park, a park that is known where hitters die. I believe it's probably the worst hitting park in the major leagues. Atlanta is planning on platooning him with Eddie Rosario and just seeing him work the count against lefties, which he did against the Mets today, including a double he got off the right-handed Seth Lugo. Of course, moving along, they also picked up Raisel Iglesias with Kenley Jansen being on an expiring contract and another deal regarding Will Smith. The Braves decided to make the move, getting Raisel Iglesias and picking up the entirety of his contract. Came in last night, got 2 big strikeouts in the Braves win against the Mets, and Atlanta's taking a big chance on this guy. Someone who had some great years in Citizens Bank, Great American Ballpark, one of the best hitting ballparks in the major leagues, and has found success in one of the worst pitching organizations in baseball, the Los Angeles Angels. The Braves like his high strikeout stuff. They think he does what the Braves need in the high leverage role, and so far the Braves have seen all of that in his first 2 outings. The Braves also got Jake Odorizzi, who made the start today against the New York Mets, won 4 2/3, giving up 3 runs and, of course, getting handed the loss. But it's some flexibility knowing that the Braves have not seen everything they've wanted this year out of Charlie Morton and Ian Anderson. I believe that Odorizzi could also be somebody that's valuable in the flex role, being a 6 starter or a long relief piece for a deep playoff run. So I do love this move. The only thing, as Hayden said, the only thing he wished the Mets would have done is maybe addressed a bigger bopper to be the right-handed DH. The only thing I wish the Braves would have done, I give them an 8 out of 10 deadline, but would have made it a 10 out of 10 if they were able to snag either Brandon Drury or Whit Merrifield, 2 contract year second basemen that can play other positions when Ozzie Albies comes back to really solidify the team. If they would have got either one of those guys, it would have been perfect. I jumped out of my seat when John Heyman reported that Whit Merrifield had been traded, but not to a certain team at that moment in time. But yeah, I believe that the Mets and Braves, the rich got richer. And hey, the Phillies got some great moves going on too. They're still in the mix. So it's going to be a great race here in the rest of the year for the National League East. But there's 25 other teams to talk about in the whole major leagues. So let's go ahead and jump in on it, Hayden. Let's start out here in the American League East. We'll give a standing update. Of course, the crosstown rival of the New York Mets, the New York Yankees have lost 3 in a row. They're having trouble beating some of the good teams around the league, having trouble with the Astros, Cardinals, Mets, just to name a few. Still with a 10.5 game lead on the Toronto Blue Jays, but the Houston Astros have basically caught them for the number 1 seed in the American League. The Blue Jays and the Rays are still hanging around, with the Red Sox being dead last at 500 and the Orioles hanging around, even though they traded Trey Mancini, winning 4 in a row to go to 55 and 51. Shout out to Baltimore. The AL Central is at least a race. A lot of years it's not been. There's been 1 good team, 4 bad teams, and they didn't really get the memo. We got 3 mediocre teams and 2 teams that are completely been rebuilding for the last 5 years in Kansas City and Detroit. Minnesota up on top by a 2-game total, with the White Sox and Guardians locked up at the second spot, 2 games behind. In the AL West, you got the Houston Astros. Of course, the American League has run through them the last 5 or 6 years. They've been in the ALCS the last 7 years running. And the Seattle Mariners, 12.5 games behind. They've had a rough stretch of baseball, losing a lot of times to the Houston Astros during that stretch, showing them that it is still their division. Behind them, you got Texas, LA, and Oakland all out of the mix. Moving on to the National League side, Hayden, do you want to go ahead, or I can continue up if you want?
Yeah, I could give a little of an analysis on the NL.
Sure.
Obviously, looking at the National League, it's getting a little close. Obviously, for that, we have a three-way tie for the wild card spot in the NL. We know that MLB recently implemented the extra playoff team from the CBA, so that has definitely been making a lot of teams work. But getting, obviously started with the National League, we do have the New York Metropolitans on top, have a 4.5 game lead over the Atlanta Braves, but who knows, that could change tonight. Could be 3.5 or 5.5. We'll see.
It will change tonight.
Are playing good baseball, 8-2 in their last 10. You like to see that. Ever since coming back from the All-Star break, this team has been phenomenal with 2-out hitting and just been clutch all around. Their pitching's been doing a great job. Bullpen's holding up, and the bats are alive. Second place, obviously, we have the Atlanta Braves. Also having a pretty good part coming back from the All-Star break, 6-4 in their last 10. Ronald Acuna Jr. is starting to heat up. He's having a pretty big series so far against the Mets. So hopefully for the Braves, he could be a big bat for them to produce. Obviously, Philadelphia Phillies, and tip of the cap to the Phillies. 10 games over 500. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They have a nice little win streak going on. I honestly thought once they fired Girardi, I thought that was kind of it for them. I didn't really think they'd do much, and especially losing Harper. But this team is just doing the job. Schwarber, Alec Boehm. I know Castellanos is getting booed and then gets a home run, but that's just how baseball works sometimes. But
somebody's got to die for him to do it, though. Vin Scully and Eagles member died the night before that he hit a game-winning home run versus the Braves. Just how the cookie crumbles with him.
Wow. Phillies doing an interesting job. They acquired Syndergaard at the deadline. Interesting pick.
Yeah.
Got the Marlins. This team has just not been able to score any runs. Obviously, no run scored today. 1 run scored yesterday. They've only scored like 3 runs this whole week. So they really have been struggling offensively, this team. Really unfortunate. You thought they'd have the moves. Obviously, Nationals, so last place. Not a whole lot of high expectations from them. Going into the Central, obviously, Cardinals and Brewers are tied for that number 1 spot. Obviously, those two teams have some great stuff going on. Cardinals have some interleague games going on, so that'll be the advantage for them. Brewers also doing a good job. Their pitching's been holding down the fort. You got the Pirates. Pirates are, doing, I guess, Pirates-like things. O'Neal Cruz, I guess, is the big thing to watch now with Ke'Bryan Hayes. Got the Cubs in 4th. Cubs, having an okay season, kind of intriguing that Wilson Contreras and Ian Happ still on this team. And then in 5th and last place, you have the Cincinnati Reds. Not much expectations there. Going into the West, probably the most exciting division in baseball, you have the Los Angeles Dodgers. Best record in MLB. They're having a great season, obviously 9-1 in their last 10, have a 6-game win streak. They've been doing phenomenal things. This team is just unstoppable, and they only get better and better and better. Obviously, San Diego Padres, they are playing a 3-game set against the Dodgers, so we'll see. Recently, you have Soto. He's been producing a little bit. Hopefully, he can start to break out into his little Soto self shortly for the Padres. Tatis will be coming back soon, so that could be a little bit of a motivation booster for them. And then really, in terms of the NL West, we got 500 and below teams. Obviously, the Giants. Giants have just really been struggling. This is just a team that, I think, Gabe Kepler is probably the same guy as he was in Philly. A lot of silly bullpen moves the last couple days. And just this team has just not been able to execute on any cylinders. Obviously, 4th and 5th place, we have the Diamondbacks. Like I said, not much to expect there. And then the Rockies, also not a whole lot to expect there. So the NL is looking pretty close and pretty exciting ahead.
Let's talk some Juan Soto.
So Mr. Juan Soto obviously was traded from the Washington Nationals to the San Diego Padres. And I think everyone and their mother probably expected that Soto wasn't going to be on this team much longer. Obviously, whether it was going to be at this deadline or in the offseason doesn't make a difference, considering that Soto has plenty of years of control left. So, I mean, maybe that was a bit of an interest. But Soto right now is with the San Diego Padres. He was traded in return for multiple prospects and I believe one major league level player. Let me just pull that up. So Nationals trade Juan Soto, and in return, trying to see who the Nationals got back in C.J. Abrams, a shortstop. They got lefty Mackenzie Gore, and then outfielders Robert Hassel III and James Wood, as well as Luke Voit. Obviously, Luke Voit, the only really MLB experienced player on that trade. And then lastly, Jarlin Susana. Hopefully I didn't say that name wrong. But yeah, Nationals didn't really give up. I mean, I don't know. Padres didn't really give up a whole lot that I expected. I mean, people were talking about the Mets trading him, and to think the Mets were talking about their first, second prospect. Padres only gave up, I think, one or two of their guys in their top five. So, I mean, Padres, I don't want to say got a steal, but you did. And you also got Josh Bell in that. So, I mean, that's really something. I mean, you got two all-star caliber players, and then in return, 4 prospects and, one MLB hitter in Luke Voit, who, he's not a horrible hitter, hasn't really, been the hitter as he was with New York in 2020, with the Yankees, obviously. Mackenzie Gore is a rookie, having an okay season. And then C.J. Abrams, rookie shortstop, had a couple stints in the MLB, was, sent down a lot, called back up. So we'll see, are the Nationals going to use him a whole lot? Nationals right now are just in a whole rebuild. And I mean, it's really unfortunate. They took the route, won the World Series. 2020 happened. 2021 started, and they kind of just said, forget it. See you Scherzer, see you Turner. Obviously, the loss from Rendon after 2019. So just, it really is unfortunate that teams make those mistakes, and Nationals ownership is just really unfortunate. But right now, I think this is a really interesting trade. I mean, Soto and Bell going to the Padres, this is a great deal. Obviously, you lost Hosmer, which I don't really think many Padre fans would care about, because you'd much rather Josh Bell, a guy who is much younger. I mean, defensively, Hosmer was decreasing defensively. His ground ball percentage was getting very concerning. You bring in Bell, a young guy. He's a contact, on-base percentage, above average hitter, and that's what you want. Hosmer does that in April and May, and then you don't see it for the rest of the season. Or at least Bell, you can get more of that throughout the whole season. And then bringing in Soto, I really don't need to explain why it's good to bring in Soto. I mean, this is a perennial all-star, future Hall of Famer, likely MVP caliber player, elite walk percentage. I mean, very selective hitter, fundamental baseball type player, hits for some power, hits for a high average, doesn't strike out a lot, has great speed. I mean, for 25 years old and accomplishing this much, this dude is just a phenomenal baseball player. So I think it's a really, interesting thing to see Soto on the Padres. Next big thing is going to be, are they going to extend him? And the Padres have done that, with the Tatis extension, with the Machado extension. So we'll see, are the Padres going to extend Soto? And, it's going to be a much more than what Tatis and Machado's worth. I mean, we're talking, 450 to 500 million plus dollars. So that's going to be a huge thing for them, probably this upcoming offseason, I'd say. I mean, depending on how their season goes. But this is going to be really exciting for Soto on the Padres.
So let's talk about the Soto acquisition for a second. At bare minimum, the Padres are getting 3 playoff runs with Juan Soto. That's if he doesn't resign. That's if he decides to walk in free agency and go somewhere else in a matter of 2.5 years. You're getting 3 playoff runs with debatably the best hitter in baseball. I mean, I would say he probably is the best hitter in baseball right now. He's on par to be up there with Ted Williams as one of the best major league hitters of all time. And the kid, not really a kid anymore, he's 22 going on 40, is already a World Series champion, as you mentioned earlier. And the sucky thing for the Nationals is I don't think whatever they get in return is ever going to live up to losing Juan Soto. Because not only did you mention that, in the last couple of years, they've lost Rendon, Scherzer. I mean, Strasburg's never been the same since his elbow injury. Reminds me of kind of what happened with you guys and Matt Harvey. Trey Turner is probably going to get the bag either with the Yankees or the Dodgers this offseason. So it's just insane. Now, here's the thing. They got the ring. They won it in their window. And now you look up and you see the Braves, the Mets, the Phillies, and even the Marlins have one of their better teams they've had the last couple of years. So it made sense, I think, at the time for the Nationals to blow it up. They felt accomplished. talk about the return, right? As you mentioned, Luke Voit is the one major league guy that they got back in return. Here's the thing. He didn't want to be in this trade. Eric Hosmer's no trade clause and him saying no to going to the nation's capital. He's not a political guy whatsoever. But also, I don't think anybody would want to ship themselves off from San Diego, a team that's currently in the thick of the playoff hunt and a dangerous team at that, to then go play with the young Washington Nationals for 2 months. And I think he has years on his contract. So I can understand why Eric Hosmer didn't want to do that. He ended up finding a different home in Boston, which I feel like they're probably a year or two away from doing the same thing that Washington is doing right now. So I feel really bad for Luke Voit. I think he was the perfect DH in that Padres lineup. You look up and down it now with Fernando Tatis actually being on the field, I think this weekend. I think we might actually have a chance to call the Dodgers-Padres game tomorrow night with Fernando Tatis in action. Hayden and I right here on Hardcore Sports Network, 8 o'clock start. The thing is, that lineup is crazy already, but Luke Voit would have made it so much better. Bell, Soto, Machado, Voit, Austin Nola and Alfaro are having better years behind the plate. Profar's been hitting the ball. You can get production out of Myers or Grisham out, one at a time. Hyung-Sung Kim, Cronenworth, one of those guys is always going to produce. And the rotation in a short game series is good with Musgrove, with Darvish. You hope that either Manaea or Clevenger can shut it down on a night. Of course, Manaea laid an egg last night, but that wasn't what the Padres expected of him when they got him. The Nationals got back a couple of good pieces, as you said, but they've been guys that have had multiple Major League Baseball stints that have not been able to figure it out. C.J. Abrams was supposed to be the guy to fix 2 holes at once for San Diego. Put Fernando's bat in the outfield to get better defensively in the infield and also replace one of the bad outfielders we've had playing for 162 games a year. That ended up not being the case when you pass up, because you can't pass up the opportunity to get somebody like Juan Soto. Abrams has shown he has a lot of talent. He's finally been kind of hitting at the major league level. I think his average is finally up to 245, close to 250 after being in 200, between El Paso, their San Diego AAA affiliate, and up with the big boys for the most of the year. Mackenzie Gore was somebody that was supposed to be one of the better prospects the last couple of years. Him and Dillinson Lamet were supposed to be the future of that San Diego rotation. We'll probably get into the other San Diego transaction when we get to the Brewers later in the episode. Mackenzie Gore has really kind of been figured out, I feel like, throughout the summer months of this season. And it'll be interesting to see what the Nationals can do with them. They always develop good pitchers, and if not, they always seem to get a couple good years out of older pitchers that have not been at the top of their game the last couple of years, for example, Gray and Anibal Sanchez. But I think this is a great deal for the Padres, and I just don't think whatever the Nationals get out of Luke Voit and these prospects will ever live up to what Juan Soto does, even if he's just there for 3 incredible playoff runs with San Diego. Hayden, where do you want to drop next?
Let's talk about some teams that have been playing a little hot. I know steak. I meant steal.
I think we all do.
Yeah, I do feel bad for the Nationals. Like, I get it, they're a division rival, but it's like, no one wants to go through a rebuild. Nobody does. But yeah, there's one team in baseball that's been really surprising, and that's the Baltimore Orioles. I know when you were giving a little bit of an analysis over the American League standings, you mentioned how really dominant, and I guess that's the word to say, the Orioles have been. Obviously, 55 and 51, most likely could be 56 and 51 at the end of the stream or at the end of this day. The Pirates are really on the verge of something special, I feel. This is a team that came into the season not with a whole lot of expectations. A lot of people were saying maybe 2-3 years and they'll start to contend. But they said, no, forget that. We're going to contend this year, 2022. And it really started off with Adley Rutschman, their number one prospect, or the former number one prospect in baseball, their catching prospect, being called up. I remember I was in New York at the time. It was May 17th, and I got the alert that he was being called up. I'm like, oh, wow, cool. A lot of MLB top prospects besides Julio Rodriguez haven't been having much success this season. So I said, okay, maybe Adley Rutschman could be that guy to have success and, kind of amp up this Orioles team, amp up the morale, the performance, fire up this team. And ever since, I think they've been like 40 and 16 or something around those lines. Correct me if any of you guys know, something around those lines. The Orioles have really just been getting the job done. And they lost Trey Mancini, but it really hasn't been that much of a blow. I mean, I get it. I think the biggest thing with Mancini was more of a personal connection than a player connection. I mean, that left field wall definitely screwed him quite a bit, but it was more of a personal connection, I think. But you look at this Orioles team and you look at the roster. I mean, you have Adley Rutschman, and for a rookie, he's having a pretty good season. I mean, besides Julio Rodriguez, I think he would be the rookie of the year if it wasn't for J-Rod. But you look at their infield, Ryan Mountcastle, good hitter. Jorge Mateo, he's providing some pop in his bat. I mean, you go to the outfield, Austin Hayes, having a great season. Cedric Mullins, pretty good season. Anthony Santander, pretty good. The acquisition of Brett Phillips, I think, was a little bit of sneaky. Has some great speed. And I mean, you really look at the pitching, and their pitching has recently been doing a pretty up to par job. I mean, for starters, Dean Kramer. This dude really has been having a great season for them. Obviously, he's been a big part to their rotation success. So yeah, I mean, right now this Orioles team has just really been something that, I don't know, just going into the season, like I said, there weren't a whole lot of expectations for the Baltimore Orioles, and they just proved everyone wrong. I mean, I don't think anyone would have ever bet the Baltimore Orioles to be, the next team out in the wild card spot. So yeah, I mean, right now, I think the Orioles are really going to be an interesting team ahead. I mean, the fact that they're able to compete and play really good ball games against, teams like the Yankees, I mean, that really goes to show you something. Like I said, I think the Orioles are really on the verge of something special. I think they are really going to have something ahead. They got a great farm system. Grayson Rodriguez, Johnson, they have some good prospects in the mix, and those guys could definitely be called up probably in a year or two to really add some depth. So, yeah, it's going to be super exciting to see them back into the play.
I think another point to be brought up is these guys have been through 4 straight 90-plus losing seasons, and at some point they're going to tune it around. I think a big helpful addition in that is they were able to get some veterans to have huge step-up revival years this year, like Rune Odor, the closer that they just traded, the last name Lopez. He went to the Minnesota Twins in a huge haul. Guys like that. Of course, the Mancini coming back the last couple of years from cancer, a great story. That's a lot of those performances have been why the Orioles are in the spot that they're in, kind of like the Giants last year. I am very disappointed in that Trey Mancini trade. I feel like they kind of rained on their own parade. I feel like, with the international draft not being able to come to a conclusion, which, shocker, the owners and the players couldn't agree on something. Who would have ever saw that coming? The qualifying offer has been put back into play. And the Orioles, for nothing, could have at least kept Mancini through the rest of this playoff chase. And if he decides to walk you at least through the qualifying offer at him, and boom, you get back 2 first-round picks that the Orioles can turn into more studs in the near future. And I feel like that would have been great for the fan base to at least see, because I feel like, honestly, if he had the choice, he might have wanted to stay in Baltimore. I mean, heck, he hit an inside-the-park home run, 2 or 3 days before even getting traded. I know your New York Mets were in the hunt for him. I feel like at the last minute, it seemed like Houston, when the Josh Bell trade went through to San Diego, they had to make their move and swoop in and take Mancini, which he hit a big home run last night and a huge win over Cleveland, which helped the Baltimore Orioles jump the Guardians, getting them closer to the wild card race. So Trey Mancini is continuing to help the Orioles without their jersey and hat on the field. I think that this has been a great story for them this year. I know a lot of big media outlets still consider them one of the rebuilding teams in baseball, and to have another 40, 50-win season. And I think realistically, as time has said, players are going to get better. If you have a farm system like the Orioles had, even in a tough division that they've been in, things are going to turn around. And you saw them in the month of July win 15 or 16 straight, including a big series against the Yankees where they won 2 of 3. And it'll be interesting to see what they do this probably 2 off seasons from now when they really start to go for it. Because, we've looked at the AL East a little bit already in this episode. I think Boston's probably a year away from deciding to scrap it. They won it a couple years ago. They've won twice this decade. With where the division is heading, it makes sense for them just to blow it up. Random light just came on behind me. The Rays are always going to be in the mix. They're never going to be a superstar team, but they're always going to be good enough to have Hayden wear their hat and be in the playoff hunt. Of course, you got the Blue Jays being one of the most scary young teams in baseball, and the Yankees are not going to go anywhere for the next couple of years. So I feel like for Boston, it makes sense for them to go into rebuild mode. And I could see Baltimore being a team that could jump Tampa or maybe Toronto has a bad year in a couple years, to be up in the mix with the Bronx Bombers. Do you want to talk some San Francisco Giants baseball back on the West Coast?
Yeah, let's get into the San Francisco Giants. Let me see their current record. I know right now, I believe they're 5 or so games under. Yeah, they're 51-55 going into series against the Oakland Athletics. 2-game interleague series against the Oakland Athletics, coming off of a really rough 4-game series against the Dodgers. They got swept. You look at this Giants team, and we saw them last year. This was a team that won over how many games last year? This was the team that won 107, I think.
Yeah,
107 games and lost only 55, where right now they've lost 55. So pretty much they're at the race of how many games they lost overall last year. So, you look at this Giants team and it's just like, what happened? I've said it a few times on my streams that I kind of felt that the Giants were kind of like a one-year wonder squad, and I didn't really think they would be able to pick up much. I think a big part was last year.
You look on the roster, there's no superstar on the team. They're a team of 26 guys that go out and get it. They had an interesting offseason, which made us believe with San Diego's inabilities to win that maybe they'd still be in the mix, but here they sit as the 8th seed in the National League in the month of August. Continue.
And I was going to say, I think the most hardest thing is last year, like you said, they didn't really have much they don't have many outstanding guys. It's a team filled with veterans. I mean, you look at this team, you have the renaissance of Brandon Belt, Brandon Crawford, Wilmer Flores, Tommy, La Stella. Austin.
Might as well bring back Hunter Pence at this rate.
I get it. You have a couple young guys. Yastrzemski, Peterson is prime age.
Yastrzemski's 31.
Is he? I thought he was much younger for some reason. Okay, so that's prime age, still 30, 31 is prime age, I guess. So, right now, you have Joey Bart, their catching prospect. Hasn't really panned out a whole lot since you've hoped. He hasn't, he played 2020, missed last year. But he's been doing, I guess, a good job behind the plate defensively. The defensive metrics seem to like him. Just offensively, he's not doing much. But, right now with this Giants team, they just don't have much young talent. And I think that's the thing that kills them. They're a team filled with, veterans, a lot of, like I said, the renaissance of the, all these players. Their rotation isn't horrible, I will say. Right now, you look at the rotation, Logan Webb, Alex Cobb, obviously Carlos Rodon had that little bad incident in Arizona where he kicked the bat and hit someone. So, little stuff like that was pretty funny. But yeah, right now, their rotation Sorry, I don't know if I got cut off there. Losing Kevin Gausman was definitely a little bit of a blow to that rotation. But, like I said, I don't know if I got cut off before I mentioned this, but the rotation, it's okay. Carlos Rodon, Alex Wood, Logan Webb, it's all right. It's nothing crazy. I think Rodon is, having a pretty okay season. I think last year he probably had a better season out in Chicago. But yeah, bullpen has kind of been a little bit of their woe. Dominic Leone has been put into many situations where he's just completely just wet the bed pretty much. He has not been doing an up to par job out there in San Francisco. So right now, and it was funny because you looked at last year, they won 107 games and pretty similar roster compared to this year. If you look at a lot of the guys, like I said, you had some X Factor guys, Kevin Gausman, okay, but still pretty similar squad. Pretty similar squad. So right now, and it was funny because a lot of people thought that what's manager's name? I just had a brain fart.
Gabe Kapler.
Yeah, Gabe Kapler. A lot of people saying he had more talent in Philly and he wasn't able to execute there. He comes here. And right now he's kind of back in the same predicament that he was in Philly. Poor bullpen management. And, sooner rather than later, the fans are going to start screaming, fire Kapler, fire Kapler. So right now with the Giants, it's tough. They're in that third, they're kind of around that 500 spot, third in their division. The Giants and Padres are kind of the ones that are saying, okay, this may be our division. So we'll see. Really hard for the Giants going ahead. You're playing some interleague games. You have a easy schedule coming up, so try and chip away those games. Otherwise, probably going to be packing the bags for them.
And the thing is they're the team that's the first one out, sitting out of the wild card race. You got Of course, the Braves and the Padres way ahead of the mix, the top two wildcard spots. A three-way tie between the central leaders, the Milwaukee Brewers and the St. Louis Cardinals, and the Philadelphia Phillies sliding in there at the sixth spot. The Giants decided not to sell, and knowing that they're a team that's still in the hunt to a degree. Now, losing 4 straight does not help your odds, being that the Cardinals and the Phillies have won 3 and 5 in a row, respectively. I think the most interesting thing is you pointed on the bullpen usage. They can't decide who their closer is, whether it's Trevor Rogers. The Jake McGee plan did not work out whatsoever. They had Camilo Doval in high leverage situations last year just to put him back in the middle relief this year. It makes no sense whatsoever. They decided to make big moves this offseason, getting Carlos Rodon, stealing Jock Peterson from the Braves, and deciding to run things back as much as they could. Joey Bart and Yermin Mercedes, which was, I think, a sneaky pickup for them midway through the year, were supposed to do enough to help Posey's hole in the lineup disappear. Bart has not been that guy. Yermin Mercedes was ruined by Tony La Russa last spring, and the Giants are sitting here at 51 and 55, looking way up to the sky at the Padres and the Dodgers, knowing what have we done to get ourselves in this predicament. And the one thing I'll give them credit for is they have won 3 World Series in the last decade, or decade and change. They're a great organization. They've been one since they were in the streets of Manhattan way back in the early 1900s. And for them to sell is really not San Francisco-like. That whole sports market is a city of buyers. You look at the Warriors dynasty. The 49ers are in the mix every year. So are the Giants, and I believe the San Jose Sharks are I don't know a lot of NHL from what I know, they're one of the more consistent hockey teams as well. That market is always going to buy. So this might be one of the worst Giants teams you see. Maybe they get a little bit of youth in here in the next couple of years, and they can hope that the Padres or Dodgers lose some key guys in free agency, like Trey Turner's, like Juan Soto's, and maybe within the next couple of years be right back in the mix, because I expect this team to probably stay about this way for the next couple of years, knowing that they're always going to spend money and they're always going to be willing to go for it, knowing their history and knowing their market size.
Yeah, and I mean, one more little key small thing to add on, is their farm system. If you get into their future, their farm is interesting considering that all of their top 5 prospects are 20 years old practically. Their top prospect, Marco Luciano, shortstop, he's only in rookie ball, just recently drafted. So, you look at their farm, and I get it, when it comes to prospects in the farm system, it can be sneaky. But, right now, you look at, MLB Pipeline's top 30 prospects, and, it's literally all of them are 2024, 2025, 2025, 2024 in terms of ETA. So, maybe this offseason, depending on how they go, if they finish, like you said, they're the next team up for the wild card spot.
7 games back, though. It's a little bit of a climb.
That's the thing. If they finish in that spot, if they, go, well, it'd be the 6th or 7th team. Yeah. If they get in that spot, maybe they could still be active in, the off season. So honestly, with the Giants, they're really in a weird predicament. They really are.
Let's check out their schedule here. I'm going to pull it up, waiting for my.
Like I said, now they're playing an interleague game between the A's. So those are 2 games you could chip off of. You got a lot of divisional matchups. Like I said,
how much do you want that division?
That's what it is. You're fortunate enough to be playing, 19 games against the D-backs and Rockies, a team that, doesn't have it all. They're better than they were last season. But you have some good matchups. You're going to play, Tigers. Like I said, a lot of Rockies, a lot of Diamondbacks games, and those are the games we're going to have to chip off of.
They got some Pirates in the near coming future, of course. Through the month of August, it looks like, other than the San Diego series, which if you can steal one and maybe a day the Dodgers really aren't on their forefront at this point in time. Let's say you win 1 of 3 in San Diego, but on that day that you win, maybe the Phillies and the Brewers also lose. That helps you in that department. You expect them to probably handle business with their rivals across town. In Oakland, they got Pittsburgh coming to the Bay between the 12th and the 14th before getting 7 in a row with the Diamondbacks and the Rockies. So if they can get on a little bit of a roll, they could be like a Mariners team last year where they're just still in the hunt, but they can't come to the conclusion that they want. And if they do, such that I think the market, as we touched on, will be willing to spend on them this offseason. And as you said, the farm system's a couple of years away. They've been doing really well with the rentals the last couple of years, turning them into okay players. It just sucks that the Padres and Dodgers are 2 juggernauts ahead of them. I think they're the definition of a third-place team. it's a tough year for them, but you got to remember the history and even just the recent history of this franchise, knowing their market size. I think they're going to be back in the mix before we know it. Where do you want to shift to now? I was thinking either circle back to Milwaukee, or we can touch on an AL team for a little bit if you want.
Yeah, I guess kind of keeping on the topic of, we talked about the Orioles before with the sneaky team. How about the Seattle Mariners? I mean, this is a team, in my opinion, that, I would definitely jump on their AL, bandwagon. This is a really exciting team. Obviously, they started off the season really slow.
Trevor Wolf called them dead.
Yeah, a lot of people, like I said, they were, a one-year team kind of type of thing. One-year wonders, I should say, is what a lot of people called them. And then they really started to, like I said, they're a second-half team. Once, June came around, they were starting to get into, a month or so before the All-Star break, they really started to pick up the pace. And, you look at their roster, and they got some key assets. Ty France is having a really great season, to say for the least. Arguably, he's been one of the best hitters in the league. Great contact guy, provides a little bit of everything. Obviously, you have Adam Frazier. He hasn't really been doing what he has been, in the Pittsburgh days, but he's definitely been, helping out with some run creation. Great defensive guy there. J.P. Crawford's having a better season than usual. You have a couple, former Met prospects in there, and Sam Haggerty. Obviously, we know him. Eugenio Suarez, not a great hitter, kind of power or nothing, but hell, 18 hitters. 18 homers. My apologies. Definitely works. So, hey, good for him. Kyle Lewis, hopefully this dude could really break out. He's kind of been one guy that I've really kind of been watching for the last couple weeks. Had the 2020 season, was injured last year, didn't provide much. So hopefully he could kind of, be maybe some type of, a 5-tool player. I think he really definitely is capable of, contact, power, great in the outfield, great arm, great speed, great athleticism. Definitely is capable of stealing bases if he really wanted to. Hasn't much because, the injury and stuff, which makes sense. And that's been a big thing. Obviously, Jesse Winker, he's been a big part to their success this season. Obviously, Jared Kalanick, former Met prospect, hasn't really lived up to the hope of what he's allegedly going to be. I don't know what it is with Kalanick. Sooner rather than later, you're going to have to start jumping the gun with him and say, okay, are we going to keep playing the game where we call him up, send him down, call him up for a week, send him down? I get it. He had one good game at Yankee Stadium. Otherwise, this year, he hasn't really been picking up the pace. So, trust me, I love Jared Kalanick. I loved him when he was in the Mets farm. I was really upset when you lost him. Maybe not so much now. But right now with Kalanick, he's going to have to start picking it up. You look at their rotation, and the acquisition of Castillo definitely provides some boost for that pitching. That was a big thing, is the pitching. Robbie Reyes hasn't really been what he's been doing last year. And I kind of expected that. I also called him a kind of one-year wonder, Cy Young type of person on my streams in the past. And I don't know. I think a lot of Mariners fans knew that they weren't going to get the 2021 Robbie Reyes from the Blue Jays, and they didn't. So what they do, they shopped out. They got Louis Castillo, and shockingly, the pitchers market this year was insane. They definitely gave up quite a bit in terms of their farm. He's been great. You have Logan Gilbert. He's been having a phenomenal rookie season. I actually attend the same school as him, so shout out to him on that, Florida native. But he's been having a really great season, an automatic strikeout machine, chasing, swinging, and missing. Logan Gilbert is definitely could get some Rookie of the Year votes for sure. Obviously, Chris Flexen, okay season, better than I guess in the past. Paul Sewald, George Kirby. So their bullpen's actually been pretty consistent for the most part. And this is a team that, like I said, offensively is very clutch. Last year, they were the most clutch team in baseball, obviously, when it came to offensive production in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. So when it comes to, being clutch, that is a key part to their success. And then obviously one guy we have to talk about is Julio Rodriguez. I kind of forgot him completely. This dude is Rookie of the Year in my opinion. He's a 5-tool player. He gets for some power. He is. He reminds me of him. He's a phenomenal player. He started off a little slow, but then like all rookies really started to pick up the pace. This is a dude who's capable of, going 20-20, maybe 30-30 if he could hit for a little bit more power. I don't know how many home runs he has now. Julio Rodriguez.
He's out in the home run derby, so clearly he's got the pop.
Yeah, I mean, we saw he has a nice, smooth swing. I mean, he's definitely capable, like I said, in terms of, stealing 21 stolen bases, 18 home runs. So, yeah, he'll get to 2020, 100%. So, who knows? Maybe 30-30 could be something for him. He's a great player for them ahead. I mean, he's proven that he was the number one prospect in baseball.
Now, I'll touch on a couple of things here. Robbie Reyes actually had a great last month and a half. I think I agree. He debatably shouldn't have been Cy Young last year. I think a lot of people were in the Garrett Cole conversation thinking that he should have won it other than Robbie Reyes' strikeout percentage. He's been a pitcher that's been, I feel like, overlooked until that last season. Him in the desert, he was with some weird Zach Greinke and Madison Bumgarner Diamondbacks teams. Excuse me. Gets traded to Toronto. Has a great situation with them, with Rios, Hyun-Jin Ryu, who's still in his prime. And they had a good little rotation going on there. He goes to Seattle. They pay the bag for him. And it just isn't working out the first couple months. Thankfully, it starts turning around like the rest of the team in the mid-June month. And since that time, the Mariners have debatably been the hottest team in the American League. Currently, the third best record in the American League, fourth seed due to them not winning the division. I think the biggest issue for them, as we touched on earlier, Hayden, is they have not been able to beat Houston. And while Houston is a heck of a team, you got to be able to beat them at least here and now to be able to compete with them in the near future. Because the Mariners went on a 15-game streak, ended up losing 5 of their next 10. Guess who their 5 losses were to? The Houston Astros. And they got to get over that demon. I know that they've gotten a couple scraps with each other. Dusty Baker clearly doesn't like a lot of what the Seattle managerial duties are doing with the Houston Astros. But I think the biggest point you look at is the Luis Castillo trade. It was a great pickup. As you said, Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, they've all had great years. But getting Castillo to pair him righty-lefty with Robbie Ray was a huge, huge acquisition. You knew they probably weren't in the Frankie Montes running within division. But to go get Castillo and steal him from the Dodgers, the Mets, the Yankees, and even the Braves that were all in the running for him was a huge pickup for the Pacific Northwest in baseball. I mean, to speak on Kalanick, right? I'm sure as a Mets fan, it looks like a loss of a trade for a couple of years with Edwin Diaz's trouble and Kalanick's prize potential. That's flipped on its head the last 4 months, with Diaz debatably being in the Cy Young conversation as a reliever this year, and Kalanick still being a 4A player. You look at next year, this 2023 season, next season, is probably going to be Kalanick's make it or break it year. Is he going to be the guy or not? Now, the one thing I say he has going for him is the Mariners have great outfield depth. You look around, they got Mitch Haniger. Kyle Lewis has been consistent the last couple of years. They've just put Jesse Winker out there. So I think what maybe has parred him off course is the Mariners have had great outfield play the last couple of years. But it's a team, Hayden, we have spent more time doing this live show than the Mariners have been in the playoffs the last 2 decades. And that's the crazy part. And I think it's ending this year. I don't think they'll win the division. I think it's maybe flipped on its head. Maybe they can chase him to make it a 7 or 8 game race to really prime themselves and Houston for the playoffs, just so both of them have that adrenaline going into October, kind of like what the Braves, Mets, and Phillies are doing over here in the National League East. I think that the future is so bright for Seattle. I think it's great for the city knowing that they got a new hockey team and the Mariners are doing what they're doing because, you look at the Seahawks, they've been the talk of the town the last 5 or 6 years, and they're just not going to be that team in the next couple of seasons. So I feel like this is a great move, and I love the future of this franchise. I know they're in the Wilson Contreras hunt. It didn't work out, but they're big believers in Cal Raleigh. And a lot of times the last couple of years, the players that they've believed on has worked out. That GM loves to trade, and if he clearly doesn't trade you, he has a lot of belief in you, and more than not, you're going to work out sometime in the future. Hey, I mean, we're also talking them up as much as we can, drunk. So there's that. So we probably got time for another 2 or so topics today. Hayden, do you want to leave the Brewers for last, or do you want to hit on them real quick?
Yeah, we could discuss the Milwaukee Brewers. Anything in particular you wanted to bring up? Or
sure, I can talk first about them if you want.
Sure, go for it.
All right, so moving on to the National League Central, we got the Milwaukee Brewers, who are currently tied for the first place spot in that division of 58 and 48. The loser of that division is more than likely going to be the 6th seed, debatably even out of the playoff hunt, with them and St. Louis being the only competition in that division. The Cubs are just entering the rebuild phase. The Pirates are still midway through it, and the Reds also just blew it up last year. So it was really confusing to me what the Brewers did at the deadline. I get it. They're a small market. They don't have a lot of money to pay these guys long term. But they just, in the middle of a pennant race, sitting comfortably at the 3rd seed in the National League, they just gifted away their all-star closer to the San Diego Padres for basically nothing. They got back Dinelson Lamet, and I believe they also got back another arm that, the Brewers seem to turn in a lot of good arms to great arms. I think they DFA'd one of them already. So I don't know if this was just a move to shed salary, and if so, why now? You're in the hunt. You were first place in your division in the middle of your window, and the Brewers' windows aren't open very long usually. I mean, they won the division in 2018, lost the wild card in an unfortunate scenario in 2019. 2020 was a rough year for them. Last year, they got right back on the horse, and the Braves, and I think the Mets debatably probably would have crapped on them in the first round either way. And here they are once again, running it back as one of the better teams in the National League, and they can't figure it out. They have pitching for days. Corbin Burns, Freddie Peralta is fully back. Brandon Woodruff, Eric Lauer has come in and been a great lefty to that rotation. Boxberger, Devin Williams. Until then, they had Josh Hader. They have been one of the best pitching teams the last half decade, but they have had no hitting whatsoever. Christian Yelich has not been the same since his MVP season. This has probably been his best year since then, but it's still nowhere of what he used to be. His power numbers have completely gone off the mountaintops. Lorenzo Cain was DFA'd earlier this year. That contract just didn't end up panning out for him. Other guys like Omar Narvaez and Willy Adames have not had the consistent average to their liking. Luis Urias probably wouldn't be a starter on most teams. I like that Andrew McCutchen pickup, but how much is the 36-year-old going to do for you when he's had 2 slumps of 0 for 20 at points this season? So I think it's a team where they've allocated too much to one area and not building a complete team. Their farm system is so-so. They have great pitching, but again, there's no offense. And the Marlins have shown you it's kind of hard to win 2-1 games all the time. And they're lucky that they're in a division where they're able to get away with that a lot. But the Cardinals are breathing down their neck. And while they're not the greatest roster either, I like their odds winning the division as of August 6, 2022 over the Brewers. I mean, Hayden, what are the Brewers doing?
Yeah, I mean, the Brewers right now, first, let's take a dive into that Hader trade. And it really was very confusing. I get it. Hader had a year of arbitration remaining. So I guess that could be a pretty big chunk of the reason on why he left. And then now you definitely added a little bit of money to the payroll this year. And it was Rosenthal, Rogers, and there was another guy. I forgot his name.
Lamet was that prospect.
And then you lost him. He walked away and he went to the Rockies. So, just little like that makes no sense. But right now, I think it's interesting. Obviously, Josh Hader was really having a rough July beforehand. And, we're not talking, a couple unfortunate long balls, some barrels. He was getting roughed up after roughed up. The Pirates series, the Giants series. I don't know what was getting in with him. He's been doing pretty good, with San Diego so far. So I don't know what it was. All relievers, they're streaky. They have their tough stretches. Even the best in the league, Liam Hendricks, Edwin Diaz, Josh Hader, they all do. But with the Brewers right now, I agree with you. They're a team that really relies on their pitching. I think they are a pitching juggernaut, as I think everyone practically has called them that before. You look at their rotation, and even last year is really what their pitching relied on. They don't really have many offensive bats. You look at their offense, and you don't see many, 300 average hitters, 800, OPS type of hitters, a 100 OPS plus type of hitters. You don't see many guys like that. You see, Willy Adames, Castillo, Rowdy Tellez, Luis Urias, Hunter Renfroe, Tyrone Taylor, Andrew McCutchen, Christian Yelich. None of those guys are really, besides Yelich in his past, none of those guys are really like, ooh, oh my God, he's an all-time hitter. They really rely on their pitching. Like I said, their pitching is what gets them through the day. That, three-headed juggernaut last year, and it hasn't been as great as last year, but still very good and elite, in Burns, Woodruff, and Peralta. And then, you go down the line and you have guys like Lauer, like Ashby, to really kind of get the job done. So right now, I look at this Brewers team, and I think they definitely would like to add a bat. And I was surprised they didn't want to add a bat at the deadline because they're, like you said, everyone knows it. They don't have much offense. They rely on their pitching. And I get it. Pitching wins championships. But there's times where you just need a power hitter or someone to just clear the bases. You need a run creator guy. And they don't really have that much now. So
you got to score at least once to win. And the Braves shut them out twice in the playoffs last year. I mean, point blank and simple. Yeah, they added McCutchen and Renfroe, but it hasn't been enough. You got guys like Colton Wong and Castillo in your lineup every day. I mean, and, Lorenzo Cain for 2 parts of the season. It's not what you need. You got to build a complete roster to win in the majors, especially in a small market in a bad division. And they just haven't done that. That's what's so frustrating. They've never won a World Series.
I mean, you got good defense. Don't get me wrong. I think this is a great defensive team, but I mean, pitching and defense is only 2/3 of the game. You need bats. You need run creation, and it's just
and speed.
hard.
They don't have a lot of that.
And it's hard with the Brewers. I mean, taking a little look-see at some of these Brewer games, they don't give up a whole lot of runs. I mean, take it with a grain of salt. They're in they're in an easy division, but you look at a lot of the teams, and it's not like they've given up 15, 10-run games a whole lot this season. So.
Seems like those are the games the offense actually scores is when they're in shootouts.
Yeah. So, I mean, right now, with the Brewers, I think it's clear they care much more about making the playoffs in the World Series. Considering that Hader trade, which was really really why, I think. So, yeah, Brewers, like I said, they're also tied with the St. Louis Cardinals. Cardinals, a team also who are having a really good season for the most part. Not surprised. Cardinals, it's really Cardinals and Brewers for the Central for the future for the most part. Cardinals had a great game yesterday against the Yankees. They've been doing great things. I think a big part of the Cardinals' success has been in Paul Goldschmidt. This dude is having an MVP caliber season. He'll probably win NL MVP unless something happens. But he has been having a phenomenal season for them, for the least. Their bats have been doing a pretty up-to-par job. Like I said, Goldschmidt being a big contributor to that. Taking a look-see, Arenado provides pretty much everything for the most part. You have Brendan Donovan. They called him up recently. He's been platooning pretty well at second. And in the outfield a little bit, Nolan Gorman, Albert Pujols, a little bit of a veteran presence there, maybe to help out some of the youngsters. That also works. You have their outfield. Like I said, this is a team that is great defensively. I think probably, I haven't checked on the defensive stats this year, but I know last year they had 5 Gold Gloves. This is a team that defensively is one of the best in baseball. When it comes to defensive positioning, the shift, or simply enough, just making elite plays on ESPN and MLB Network the next morning. So the Cardinals, they're really a great team. My only concern with them is their pitching staff being a little bit older, and they kind of addressed that. Like last year, I was very concerned with the age. But they addressed that. They brought in Quintana. They brought in
Montgomery's facing the Yankees tonight, which is very awkward.
Another young guy who, just
facing his old team.
Bader, and just giving up Harrison Bader for that. That's kind of a steal a little bit. So, like I said, last year it was really a veteran core rotation, and they addressed that. They brought in Quintana, obviously. So, like I said, Miles Michaelis, he's been having a great season for them. So right now I think the Cardinals definitely have some success down the line, and I think it's really, like I said, regardless, both of these teams are going to make the playoffs, whether it's divisional wild card, and let's be real, I think, everyone wants to be the division champion. But Cardinals, they got some good stuff going. They really do. They're just a team, like I said, they're the NL Yankees, pretty much. That's how I say it.
So I don't think there's a lot more to cover here on the first official episode of the Longball podcast. This podcast isn't going anywhere. It's mostly going to be a Saturday evening live show across a lot of our different networks. Hayden's Twitter, the network's YouTube and Twitch, along with mine. Make sure you give us both a follow on Twitter. My @'s right here at Newsome Sports ATL. We'll be happy to talk any baseball or sports with you guys. Hayden, what's your Twitter?
Yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter @Mets Hayden. It's pretty much where I tweet out my thoughts, news, all that stuff, and of course my YouTube channel, Mets Talk with Hayden, in the description. Great stream. I really do appreciate everyone for tuning in, and obviously Blake for coming on here. Definitely excited for next Saturday. Hopefully some more great stuff happens. Let's go Mets. Let's go baseball overall. Let's get it.
Let's hopefully the Braves were able to dethrone Mad Max and the Mets and Queens tonight, which is why the show was set up perfectly for us to go get off air and go watch the second game of this doubleheader. Hayden is looking for a doubleheader this week. I'm looking for a split. It's a big series tonight, or big series this weekend in the city of Queens between the Braves and the Mets. we will see you guys tomorrow night for the Dodgers and the Padres. You guys be back right here on any of the same networks we'll be telecasting to for a play-by-play edition of the Padres and the Dodgers. Tatis might be on the field, and if so, that's another interesting piece to cover. So for Hayden and I, this will be official episode 1 of the Longball podcast. We'll get more professional in the future. We'll add better segments, and hopefully this offseason we really start cranking in the content for 2023, because that is the year of the Longball podcast. No longer the dead ball. Go Longball, and we'll see you guys